start. Awesome,
I think
awesome.
I may be able to do one more brief one.
Okay, that's cool, and we can pick up where we left off and talk about the actual meat of the matter, Kyle Rittenhouse at another time. So, um, how do you
Yeah, I'm
feel
happy to
about
do this again tomorrow.
yeah? And again, I really appreciate you taking this time. I really do. So, how do you feel about Kyle Rittenhouse? Oh, excuse me. How do you feel about red flag laws? You know what those are?
Where some aspect of somebody's criminal history flags them
No,
uh,
not
for a purchase of a weapon.
not quite. A say a person, a man and a woman, they decide to break up, and the woman decides to uh, call up the police and say that my husband, my ex-husband, or my ex-boyfriend has said these things or done these things that he hasn't done, and I think he's a harm to the community, and I think it'd be a good idea if you took his guns. And that notice, right? Law enforcement takes her police report, goes in front of a judge, and the person that's being judged, right? The person with the firearms, the private citizen with the firearms, the ex-boyfriend, is not called to this meeting, and the police agency goes in front of the judge and says, "We got this report of this crazy guy with a bunch of guns who's said these things that aren't a crime, that has done these things that may or may not be a crime, but obviously they're in the past, and we don't know. Can you please sign this red flag order so we can go over without due process?" And take his firearms because we believe he's a danger to the community. It's called,
I understand.
yeah. These,
Generally, I would disagree with that practice. I think that if there's somebody just claiming, "Oh, this person said something," I don't think that it allows anybody to have their possessions taken from them. I think that if there is a specific known threat, if it's somebody got a social media post saying I'm going to go shoot up a school, or whatever it is, I think that those things might be specific factors looked at in a specific court case. But again, talking at a high level, I would disagree with red flag laws in general, having somebody have their weapons removed without any due process and without a legitimate evidence based um, reason or warrant for it.
okay, because a lot of people believe, a lot of people, myself included, believe that these are forms of pre-crime, right? You're punishing a man for a crime that he has not actually committed.
I would agree. And if, unless that crime is the threat of a crime, if you are then threatening to go and kill somebody, if you say that and there's evidence that you said that, that is a crime. So that
Okay.
is no longer a pre-crime. But if somebody's like, "Yeah, my ex-boyfriend, he's always saying these crazy things and I think his guns should be removed," going and removing his guns, especially without any sort of due process, is absolutely an infringement.
Okay.
And I would agree with you 100%.
Now, in this case, the previous thing we were talking about, felons having their gun rights restored or not taken at all. I remember reading. I can't cite, but so I'm just gonna say it. I remember reading this online, but because I can't cite it, I'm just gonna say it was a rumor. Um, there was a guy in one. I think it might have been California. He was a felon and not allowed to have firearms, and he wound up in a situation where he was 100% in the correct in a self-defense shooting. And when he was when the police came and they arrested him and they're like, "Oh boy, you're a felon in possession of a firearm." The prosecutor of that jurisdiction declined charges. Right, so it was selective enforcement. Right, it was justice maintained or justice delivered, not by the law, but by law enforcement going, we're not going to enforce the law in this particular case, right? I don't like that. I don't like that where there's justice either maintained or justice delivered when law enforcement it refuses to do its fucking job as according to right the book, right? If and this is ultimately the point that I'm trying to get at. If following the law leads you to death, right? What good is the law?
Now, sort of thinking of your scenario, as far as prosecuting a crime, I think that that should depend a lot on the available evidence. I don't think every crime should be prosecuted if it's certainly not going to pass the court case.
Right.
I don't think the money should be spent to prosecute a losing case. So, if we were to take, your example there and kind of associate the things that I've said before with the Kenosha incident, if him having that gun, if the action of him committing the crime of illegally having that gun is actually what led to the altercation, then I think that that there probably should have been a prosecution. If it just so happens that that altercation would have gone down, whether or not he was armed, and he then pulled out his gun and defended himself, I think that there is both a self-defense argument for the shooting and a criminal penalty for possessing the firearm.
I, I mean, in my personal opinion, you can't. And this is my personal opinion. You can't if you punish self defense, even what at the time what according to the letter of the law is illegal self defense. You punish what message does that send for the rest of us?
Well, it's
And
not punishing the self-defense. The self-defense was not charged. There was not a murder charge or a assault charge or any, and none of those things were charged because it was self-defense. The fact that there was a self-defense case doesn't change the fact that another separate law was broken, and that is possessing a firearm illegally.
okay,
That other law, that other violation doesn't go away, even though all the other actions were justified.
okay. Just so I understand what you're saying, in the rumor case that I can't cite, so just call it a rumor, a hypothetical scenario. You think that the individual who illegally carried a firearm should still face prosecution, even though um, if he didn't carry that firearm, he would be more than likely in a bad spot.
If the if carrying the firearm
Provoke the incident. That's what you're
was
saying.
was a provoking of the incident, then he should be charged for
Okay.
harm caused
Okay.
in that. If the incident was completely separate from the possession of the firearm, uh, those are two separate crimes. I think that he should be allowed to defend himself, even with an illegal weapon. I think that if he was in a situation that was going to happen one way or the other, and not having the gun means he dies, and having the gun means he defends himself, um, it's self-defense, not a murder charge, not an assault charge, not an assault with a deadly weapons charge, not any of those others. Still violating conditions of parole. Um,
Or just being a felon in possession of a firearm.
right, and of course, I would not agree with somebody's felony status sticking with them after their punishment is carried out. So if that's the case, I would want that law changed, but I would still want the law followed as it is at the time. So if being in possession of a firearm led to the incident, then he's responsible for the damage caused from his crime.
Okay.
If having the weapon did not cause the incident, but allowed him to defend himself, he's not liable for that damage. He's still liable for the law he broke.
Okay. I personally disagree, but I understand your opinion. And this is my personal opinion, right? If you have a situation like that where if a person followed the law, right? If you have a situation where a person is alive only because he didn't follow the law, that and this is my personal opinion. I've thought about this a lot. That's really bad for the law. That's really bad for the society of the law. It's situations like that where a person can point and go, if that person had followed the law, they would be dead, and they are only alive because they had not followed the law. If they are only alive because they had broken the law. That in my personal opinion is not that's not a good That's not a that's
Well, it
not a
should certainly be considered in the court case. That should play into leniency. That should play into, sentencing. All of those are the places that kind of consideration comes into play. Violating the law is still violating the law, and guilt or innocence depends on your actions. But the proper response to that, to a perceived guilt or to a determined guilt, the proper response should depend on factors, just like what you said.
okay. Okay.
So maybe this just means that his probation is extended, or I don't know. I don't know what
Okay.
that means, but
Okay.
it doesn't mean he gets off scot
I,
free for other crimes.
again, I'm asking in good faith, and here in the fundamental problem I'm running into is that um, I believe in certain situations, like the one I just mentioned, that the law, as it's written, is wrong. It's completely wrong, right? And I think I know a lot of people disagree with me, is that blindly following the law is just as bad as blindly disobeying the law. And the reason I say that is because sometimes the law is written by people who've never known fear, never known pain, never been in a fight, right? They don't really know the ugly side of life. And so the law as it's written, suddenly, you end up in these really wacky situations where if a person had followed the law, they would be dead. And that's not good. You end up in a situation where you have to ask, what is the letter of the law versus what is the spirit of the law?
Well, I
So,
would agree that many laws, all across the board, are not perfect. They have positives and negatives. There's a system for changing or addressing those perceived issues that would look at how likely of a scenario is this that we're talking about. I mean, is this something that just happened once or twice where the entire rest of the case law happens a different way, or is it a common occurrence that needs to be considered? There is a
okay,
process for going in and addressing laws that are not doing their job.
okay, you know,
Until that happens, the laws still need to be enforced, and they can't be enforced selectively.
okay, okay, and it's I- you know, I'm of the personal belief that nearly every rule and every law is made to be broken, and that in the course of life, there come situations that that you have to you have to take. I don't want to say take the law into your own hands, but you have to understand that sometimes the law isn't always looking out in your best interest. But that's my personal opinion. Uh,
That's certainly very true. If you want to look at a completely separate non-weapons related example, you look at the civil rights movement of the 1960s. You look at people like Martin Luther King. They engaged in different protests, and some of them were not all legal methods. I think that breaking the law, sitting in the wrong
I'm gonna
seat,
post I'm gonna I'm gonna post
breaking
that
that
on
law is the
YouTube.
right thing. You are still sorry.
I wanted to let you know I'm posting this on YouTube, so don't say anything you might regret.
No, completely understand.
Okay.
But following the law is not always the right thing to do. However, when somebody, and you could go back to Henry David Thoreau, he was sort of the premier of this idea. Sometimes you break a law. Sometimes that puts you in jail.
Hmm.
It was still right to break the law. You were still doing the right thing. That doesn't mean that the consequences that come from that should be wiped clean.
I
Sometimes violating a law comes with a criminal penalty, and sometimes it
I
was still the right thing to do.
I personally couldn't disagree with you more. I believe that the law is a human institution, and it does entirely get selectively enforced. That there are that if there
Certainly does, but it shouldn't.
I I can't help but disagree with you on that. I think that and this is the point that I'm trying to make, is that the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, are two entirely separate things, and sometimes a prosecutor, sometimes a prosecutor has to make a decision. Do we want a country, or do we want a prosecutor or prosecutors all over the country to follow you know the spirit of the law or the letter. And I personally want the spirit. I personally, because what is the entire point of the law, right? To govern behavior and hopefully uh, reduce or stop harm, right? To deliver
Sure.
justice, to do what is right.
And there are processes to correct the letter of the law when it does not apply to the spirit of the law.
Right, but
There are ways to do that, and that's the duty of every American citizen. That is the duty of every prosecutor to follow through with that. If a law is unconstitutional, it should be challenged.
when the law, according when the letter of the law prosecutes the right doer, and that's what I'm trying to say is that um, what is right in the fabric of reality is not always what is right in the letter of the book, right? There's a phrase in combat training, right? Combat training is the map, whereas real combat is the territory, and that's really the difference, right? The law is a map, right? The written word is a map, whereas the things that actually happen in real life is the territory. One is not necessarily the other, but that's my opinion. I know you said you didn't have too much longer. So are you? How much more time you got?
I think that if we've hit the end of this subject, I think that it would be good to pick up another time.
Okay, okay, and you're open to that?
Absolutely. This has been very interesting.
I know, yeah, yeah. Did you want to retort to what I said because I feel like I cut you off there. Did you want to?
Oh no, I agree with what you're saying. I think I could only repeat myself. I get where you're coming from, and I get the point. However, I think the ultimate line is the law as it exists has to be followed and enforced, and unconstitutional laws have to be challenged.
Okay,
But that doesn't change the fact that it is a violation, and that needs to be handled
okay, all right.
according to the law.
Um, and you're open for something tomorrow?
Yeah, I could do this tomorrow.
Okay, awesome, awesome. I appreciate it. And yeah, I think tomorrow, we'll get into what self defense is, and then probably after that, I think that's the final topic. I want to cover before we actually get into the meat of the Kyle Rittenhouse situation. Appreciate it, bud. Thank you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
What time tomorrow? Do you want it to be around this time, 11:45?
Um, it's going to be somewhere between. It's 11:45 where you are. It's 2:45 here. It's going to be somewhere between 12 and 2 Eastern,
Okay,
but I will be able to let you know more specifically in the morning.
sounds good. Appreciate it, bud. See ya.
All right, thank you.